So you look at the person on the street and they're shivering and they're cold, and it's innate to want to help them. Like, that's natural. I mean, for all the shitty things that human beings do, there is still a wonderful goodness, especially when it comes to, like, we share 99% of our DNA with creatures who still walk on this planet, who exhibit the same traits as us, who work in communities, who help each other out, who uplift each other. Now, most mammals do that. It's actually a beautiful thing. And we have to be reinforced and programmed over and over and over to think a different way, to look at someone, and instead of feeling that natural inclination that you have to be empathetic, to want to help them, to put a blanket around a shivering person, to think of them as less than human.
It is time for the Senate to act. This week on the Senate floor, Mitch McConnell wants to vote to override Trump's veto on the $740 billion defense spending bill and then head home for the new year. I'm going to object until we get a vote on legislation to provide $2,000 direct payment to the working class.
So this is huge. This is huge. McConnell blocks initial Democratic effort for $2,000 COVID stimulus checks. Growing number of Republicans back Trump's demand to increase relief payments as party plunges into chaos and conflict. A growing number of Republicans on Tuesday backed Donald Trump's demand to increase coronavirus relief payments to U.S. citizens from $600 to $2,000. Though the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell blocked a Democratic effort to quickly pass the measure, Trump's party has been plunged into chaos and conflict over the demands to increase one-off checks for Americans, a measure that passed the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives on Monday. $2,000 for a great people, not $600, Trump tweeted on Tuesday, before using a racist term to describe COVID-19. They have suffered enough from the China virus. Some critics saw Trump's move as an apparent return to his posture as a populist outsider and a disruptor of the Washington establishment. Shame on you, Guardian. No, he's just a petty man-child, and he's just like, I want things to go my way. And his loyalty test strengthened his sway after he leaves offices. His position also threatened to divide his party and create a dilemma for McConnell, while Democrats and Senator Bernie Sanders see a renewed chance to pass a higher amount of aid. Now, I want all of y'all who basically said that Bernie Sanders is a coward, or he gave up fighting for the common man, to give yourselves a cold glass of water in the face. All right, just one cold glass of water. I'm not asking much. I'm just saying one cold glass of water. It's the I didn't believe in Bernie challenge, because the man didn't drop out because he was suddenly weak. He didn't jump out of the race because he was like, I no longer care. It was because he didn't want people to die, and he didn't have, I guess, the same tolerance for blood as Joe Biden did, where one party was like, go out and vote in person, and Bernie was like, well, they're never going to stop. I realize this now. They will watch as every single American catches COVID, and then after the fact say that you shouldn't have voted in person. And that's exactly what happened. After he'd acquiesced, they were like, well, you shouldn't have voted. Hopefully none of you did, and I definitely stand by that. But Bernie Sanders, at his age, doing filibusterings. Yeah, if you're unaware, filibusterings, the age-old tactic of just talking. It's basically doing what I do. But you see, I do this for like 4 hours a day. Who's the longest streamer? Asan, right? So Asan Piker does this for what, 10 or 12 hours a day? Bernie Sanders is doing this so people can eat and pay rent.
But right now, last night, the House of Representatives, with a 2/3 majority, 275 to 134, 2/3 bipartisan vote, moved to increase the direct payment going to working families from $600 per adult to $2,000 per adult. The House did the right thing. I congratulate them. And now it is time for the Senate to step up to the plate and do what the working families of this country overwhelmingly want us to do.
Thanks, Chip and Stick.
Madam President, as a result of the pandemic, tens of millions of Americans have lost their jobs and their incomes.
Snucleus, and those are great names, Nucleus. That's going to depend on us. As like any pressure that's going to come from politicians to make significant change happen is a pipe dream. If you want in the next 4 years anything significant to happen, and dramatic things need to happen in terms of social safety nets and basically the great reset that you've heard of, the changing of the entire capitalist economic system to let's get back to a little bit more Keynesian economics, more equitable forms. That's not going to happen from Joe Biden. That's not going to happen from Kamala Harris. It's not going to happen from the Democrats. That's going to happen if there's concerted pressure from the populace demanding change. That's the only thing that they'll acquiesce to.
These families in the middle of the winter now face the threat of eviction and the possibility of being thrown out in the streets. Hunger in America is at the highest level that it has been for decades, with moms and dads struggling to feed their kids and working families lining up mile after mile to get emergency food packages. We are even seeing an increase in grocery store shoplifting as desperate Americans try to keep their families from going hungry. All of this taking place in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Madam President, over the last number of years, as I think everybody in America.
So breaking, McConnell before Senate adjournment started the Rule 14 process to get two bills onto the calendar. The House passed the 2000 bill and Section 5085 to increase an additional 2020 recovery rebates to repeal Section 230 of the Communications Act of 1934 and for other purposes. So for those wondering if the Republicans would combine the $2,000 direct payments expansion with the 230 repeal, the answer is yes. Now I've read Section 12 and the proposed changes and I don't understand the con. The GOP is pulling in to destroy a securities threshold. Wow. Everyone is playing everyone right now. It's unusual. Did not expect to see this many cards being thrown down right before holidays. It's good timing. I mean, the filibuster especially, because they can't adjourn until this is all done. And let's be honest, they're completely fine with letting everyone just basically stay by the wayside. Like, let everyone fend for themselves over the Christmas break while we go back to our cozy homes.
In fact, in the midst of this pandemic, this terrible pandemic, inequality has grown worse, with many in the billionaire class seeing their wealth increase by hundreds of billions of dollars, while average Americans struggle to put food on the table. Congress has given huge tax breaks to large corporations.
Enormous tax breaks for large corporations. And by the way, I know everyone is worried about the gender reassignment surgery that you'll be paying for apparently as part of this bill, which is just strange nonsense cooked up by Tim Pool, most likely. But no one's talking about the $500 million in aid to Israel. I mean, that $500 million could be spent domestically. Just saying.
So that some of the most profitable and largest corporations in America today pay zero in federal income taxes. We have just passed the largest military budget in the history of our country, $740 billion, more than the next 10 nations combined.
Hey, Bay Staff.
And by the way,
welcome back.
There was almost no debate about the size of that huge budget. Trump's veto dealt.
So you're saying the money comes back. It's really just an investment, because at the end of the day, they're just going to spend that money on weapons from Raytheon. So it's the circle of life. That's what that movie was about. I was wondering why Disney keeps remaking it.
Meanwhile, over 500,000 Americans are homeless. Half of our working families are struggling to survive.
The circle of death.
And in the midst of this terrible, unprecedented pandemic, over 90 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured in the midst of a pandemic, and they're not sure whether they can afford to go to a doctor. Madam President, we are coming to the close of one of the most terrible and painful years in American history. That is a tragic fact. Over 330,000 of our people have died from COVID-19, and as we speak, we are seeing record-breaking numbers of new cases and hospitals around the country being overwhelmed with new admissions. During the last year, the education and well-being of tens of millions of our young people, from childcare to graduate school, has been disrupted. And the terrible emotional isolation that this pandemic has caused, where people are unable to spend time with their family or their friends, has resulted in a huge increase in mental illness, drug addiction, and even suicide. Madam President, as I mentioned, the House has done the right thing. By an overwhelming vote, Democrats and Republicans voted to increase that $600 direct payment to $2,000. Recent poll came out. 78% of the American people think that was the right decision. They're hurting. They want help. The leaders of our country, President Trump, President-elect Biden, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, are all in agreement.
It would be nice to see them come out and talk about it a bit more. I mean, I know Joe Biden gave a big speech about how Donald Trump has kind of messed up the whole, transition period between the two administrations, but I'm not seeing them fight publicly about this. Everyone's tweeting out a lot of well wishes, though. A lot of good holiday things, Everyone knows what to say. Senator Marco Rubio of Florida did likewise, stating, "I agree with the president that millions of working class families are in dire need of additional relief, which is why I support $2,000 in direct payments." Now, this is a really interesting situation, everybody. I didn't see it going down like this, but right now, basically, because of Donald Trump's pettiness, we've got this amazing scenario in which the Democrats have come forward and they've said, yes, we are for the $2,000 payment. In fact, we're going to just go forward and approve it. So it goes to the Senate to be destroyed. But this is an odd thing for Mitch McConnell to destroy, because basically it's his time-honored tradition of hating the poors, of which Mitch McConnell has basically solidified that his entire career, versus the fact that this is not going to play well in the upcoming Georgia Senate runoff election. And why would it? Because most people who are witnessing this now, like you heard good Bernard Sanders saying, everyone wants this. This is kind of a no-brainer. It's a pandemic. People are starving. They're stealing. They're actually increasing the amount that they steal from supermarkets, not because suddenly they think it's like, metal or something. It's because it's to survive. So at a time like now, no better time than ever to provide relief for working class Americans who need it, whether that's to pay rent, to eat, whatever. And yet he's still obstructing it. Still. It's such an unusual play. He is risking losing the Senate for his desire to continue giving a middle finger to working class Americans. That's what's going on here. $2,000 stimulus checks could mean the difference between American families having groceries for a few weeks or going hungry, the difference between paying rent or being kicked out of your home that you've lived in for years. It could buy you precious time for tens of millions of people to get the vaccine, thankfully, as it makes way across the country. Oh, and don't get me started on Marco Rubio, by the way. He's starting a wonderful pattern of individuals who have now been vaccinated and have the audacity to talk shit about measures to protect other people, like masks and stuff. I knew that was going to happen. I was like, you're going to see all these fucking ghouls. They're going to come forward. They're going to get vaccinated, and then they're going to talk shit right afterwards. They're going to be like, oh yeah, the whole thing's exaggerated. We should open up the stocks and everything. We need it for the glory be. Let's sacrifice our bodies. This week on the Senate floor, Mitch McConnell wants to vote to override Trump's veto of the $740 billion defense spending bill and then head home for the new year. I'm going to object until we get a vote on legislation to provide a $2,000 direct payment for the working class. House Republicans will join with Democrats to override Trump's veto of the defense bill. Bernie Sanders vows to block the Senate override until Mitch McConnell schedules to vote on the $2,000 payments. I believe that's all happened now.
I rise to strongly urge members to uphold what we did in this chamber just a couple weeks ago and what the Senate did as well. And that is we passed an overwhelmingly bipartisan bill with roughly 80% of the vote in both the Senate and the House. The legislative branch made it absolutely clear that we support this piece of legislation. And as the gentleman from Texas just noted, we support it with very good reason. It is enormously important to give our troops the support that they need to carry out the job that we all are asking them to do.
On this vote, the yeas are 322, the nays are 87. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the bill is passed. The objections of the President to contrary notwithstanding, the clerk will notify the Senate of the action of the House.
I mean, I am enjoying this. People like Sean Hannity, like right now, Republicans fighting each other over this. Sean Hannity, Mitch blocks, McConnell objects to instant vote on 2,000 COVID relief check for Americans. I mean, it's no surprise. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. This is a popular sentiment. Who knew? People like getting money, especially when they need it, right? But you might be asking yourself, and this one confuses me too, why exactly is Mitch McConnell blocking this? Like, why does Mitch McConnell hate poor people or hate the working class so much? What is in it for him? Is he going to save a whole bunch of money? What does the turtle get from doing all this kind of ghoulish shit? And it really goes back to that idea, like, you have to be programmed to a certain extent to basically walk down the street and see someone shivering and not give in to your innate desire to be empathetic, because that comes naturally, right? If you see someone on the street and they're cold, you don't think to yourself immediately, naturally, just organically off the top of your head, well, that's a parasite, that's a leech, and they basically failed at the game of life. And because of that, that's why they're in the situation they're in. And it's only bad if I give them any kind of help or support, because that will just reinforce their welfare-like behavior, because they're just going to get used to getting handouts. And that's the way the system works. And I was the exact same way, by the way. I was, for years, completely indoctrinated to the sentiment that perhaps it's a good thing if I do everything according to plan, right? Because we measure our success under capitalism based on our ability to succeed within the system, to climb the meritocracy. That's the entire point of this entire economic system that we find ourselves in. In fact, under the capitalist system, it's built into the very core of it. The only way to turn a profit under capitalism is to sell a good or a product for more than it costs you to make that. So it's woven into the very fabric of the system itself. And then if you have a neighbor, it's up on them to be able to do the same thing, but better than you, either for lower cost or to sell more of them or to just run you out of business. It pits people against people. Everyone is in competition with each other. So you live your life along this idea that the only way to have self-worth is to accumulate wealth, is to be successful at your job. And that permeates every aspect of your life, whether it's your relationship. You have to be with an even more attractive partner, because we've now interwoven the ability to attract someone with this entire ability to purchase goods and services that will make us feel better, look better, become more affable, things of that nature. So you look at the person on the street and they're shivering and they're cold, and it's innate to want to help them. Like, that's natural. I mean, for all the shitty things that human beings do, there is still a wonderful goodness, especially when it comes to, like, we share 99% of our DNA with creatures who still walk on this planet, who exhibit the same traits as us, who work in communities, who help each other out, who uplift each other. Now, most mammals do that. It's actually a beautiful thing. And we have to be reinforced and programmed over and over and over to think a different way, to look at someone, and instead of feeling that natural inclination that you have to be empathetic, to want to help them, to put a blanket around a shivering person, to think of them as less than human. Like, that has to be taught to you through years and years. It has to be reinforced by millionaires speaking to you, who are funded by billionaires, who are telling you day in and day out that that is a cockroach, that's a leech, that's a welfare king or queen on the street, instead of the natural feeling you might have to be empathetic towards another human being. We have to be taught that day in and day out. And it's disgusting, and yet we can't escape it. And once you flip that script, it's not a bad thing to want to help someone. In fact, it's even self-serving. That's the wild part about all this. You know that old adage, altruism is its own reward? It's true. It feels good when you help people. Like, it'll feel 10 times better to put a blanket around the shivering person than it will to just condescend to them, or to continue to think of them as some kind of a virus in society, as if, for whatever reason, people choose to be that way. Does anyone choose to be poor? Does anyone choose to have mental illness? Does anyone choose to be abused? Does anyone choose to be an addict? Like, who wakes up in the morning and is like, yeah, I want to be ostracized from my friends, my family, everyone I love, in exchange for the ability to chase one thing and one thing only, and that's to get my next fix. That's what I'm looking for. But that's what it's being reinforced into our minds every single day, day in, day out. And this mentality is something that we share with each other instead of, again, our natural inclinations to help one another, which, I don't know, I would say is decidedly fucked. And that's Mitch McConnell in a nutshell. That's the entirety of Mitch McConnell. Right there.
What lies around the corner? Never knowing who's going to kill you. Are you the next one to be murked? You never know if it's a friend or a foe. If you want to see the biggest names in BreadTube and Left Twitch and Butterthing and I don't know the fucking names anymore, come see Left Among Us.
If you want us to advertise your channel or work, please go to weareserfs.com and email us a 20 to 30 second ad, and we'll take it on to the end of one of our videos to help promote your leftist channel or progressive something. Whatever you do.
To our God, I'm Rast, Xander Corvus, and Schlatsky, we shall commit blood sacrifices in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, our lives are yours to command. To our lords, Jeffrey Lamb, Trevor R., Stephen, Hans Josephine, Poppy Nelson, Ryan Lubin, Jimothy K. Meeblebeeps Jr., we bow meekly for your pleasure. To our knights of the round table, Josh Mickelson, Dylan Bythe, Zach Christensen, Todd Buckingham, Todd Lajeunesse, Political Puppy, Jimmy Bignuts, Andreas Chitoro, Good Poon Hates Cops, That's Solid Poon Then, Dr. Zayas, Yoppy, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Jack Darko, Thomas Barretton, J. Fraser Cartwright, Goofalankius, Melissa Murphy, Nicholas Marks, Alexander Thaler, Ali Rada Jaffer, Alex Gauvin, Radical Maniac, we salute you.